How confident can we be that we have 7 real Pauline epistles, despite generously dated texts such as 1 Clement and Ignatius? We don't hear anything about Paul until the late 2nd century via Marcion's detractors.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a mystery, actually. Yeah, as his theory was, in the late 1st century, somebody, we don't know who, put together a very purposeful collection of Pauline letters to 7 churches. And 7 was important because it also interacted with the letters to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation. But how much Christians were remembering Paul between, say, about the year 65 and 100? We have almost nothing. I mean, the author of Revelation himself doesn't really interact with Paul. And then when you come down to the question of authenticity, well, you have to ask yourself some real important historical questions. And that is, where did we get these letters? Who preserved them? Did Paul himself keep copies of his own letters so that they could be easily collected? Did individual assemblies or churches keep copies of the letters? If so, why? Who has control of them between about 65 to 100, and why? And are they viewed as important? And what's the evidence? So those are questions I don't know.
If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christianity could never have grown, if you will, to what it is now. Dr. Litwa, how do you respond?
Well, historically, yes, it was pathetically small, and pathetically small even in the 2nd century. It was a weird cult movement, and most aristocratic Romans just took no notice of it, or whenever they referred to it, just was like, what is this? And the first time a Greco-Roman writer feels the need to do a full-scale attack on Christians is about 177 with Celsus. They would have looked pathetic, even into the 3rd century. I mean, if the resurrection did produce an explosion of growth, it came really, really late. It must have been a really, really delayed effect. I mean, let's face it. The thing that really caused Christianity to grow was that it became the state religion in, the year 313, and then the official and only religion by about 380.
Christianity still exists after all the persecutions.
Well, I have to laugh a little bit about that, because the most recent research in early Christianity really shows that Christians weren't heavily persecuted. And this is part of evangelical and apologetic myth, that, the apostles wouldn't have died for what they didn't think was, absolutely true. Well, the fact is most apostles didn't die. And those myths about the apostles dying are all late 2nd and 3rd century. Okay. In what are called the apostolic acts. And, there's the Acts of Andrew and the Acts of Thomas and the Acts of Philip and the Acts of Bartholomew, and all those texts you should know about, but they're not 1st century texts. And I mean, there's really not a whole lot of evidence that apostles were dying left and right. Okay. They weren't. They really weren't. Most of them died of old age. Most of them didn't even recognize themselves as apostles. Okay. So let's stop reading the 1st century in light of later developments. That's the first thing.
How does a failed apocalyptic prophet who died a humiliating death fulfill the Roman archetype of hero and become divine within living memory?
Well, he might not have become divine within living memory. I mean, we don't exactly know, because there's that dark period between about 30 and 100 where we have no data. I mean, there's no manuscripts, so we don't know what was said. So we always have to be humble and just say that, we've lost a lot, and that's why we can't always be fixated on the 1st century, because it's just simply a wasteland and a void. So what we have is 2nd century memories of the 1st century, and by the 2nd century they don't view Jesus as a failed apocalyptic prophet. That's all modern theories, and it's actually. But the point to remember here is that, among many Greek heroes, one of the things that made you a hero was that you died an awful, excruciating death. Okay.